Hello and welcome. If you've clicked on this video, you're here to see about the Grizzly Rage Poison Druid, so let's check it out together. So a quick few things we're going to cover with this build is a speed farming build. It is not the best at lair bosses. It can do them in Torment 4, but it is not the best. Where it's really going to perform is in Infernal Hordes, escalating Nightmare Dungeons, as well as Hell Tides. So we are going to cover how we have it set up on our build, and we'll discuss some changes that you can add to the build if you don't have all these mythics. So first, the only mythic that is super important for this build to operate is the Andariel's Visage. Getting this lucky hit chance to get the Poison Nova is very critical for us, because it is going to allow us to stack some poison multiplier through the seasonal gem that we have socketed in one of our pieces of jewelry. We run the Tyrael's Might. This is just because it will solve our resistance problems. Without this, resistances we are going to struggle with big time. So I highly recommend the Tyrael's Might, but you can also try the Shroud. It may be able to give you a little bit more damage. For our gloves, we are going to use the Fists of Fate. With the Fists of Fate, we are getting a super high lucky hit chance, which gives us more chances to proc our Andariel Visage, as well as our one Spirit Boon, which we'll cover in a few moments here. For our pants, we're using Tibalt Will. With our Grizzly Rage, we're constantly unstoppable, so we're going to always get the damage multiplier for being unstoppable, as well as some flat damage reduction from the pants. And getting the life and all stats on here also will help with our build. For our boots, we generally want the on hit to reduce the cooldown of evade, but unfortunately, I don't have that, but that is ideally what you would want, and you're going to want a willpower, max life, and rabies on here. And then for tempering, you're going to use movement speed, preferably in the form of Digigade Great, and lucky hit chance. And for our aspect on here, we're using the Dire Wolf's aspect, allowing us to stay in our werewolf form while we're in Grizzly Rage. One thing to note on here, for our runes, we're using Moni Lum. This is just so we can maintain our primary resources. For our weapon, we are using the Shattered Vow. With the Shattered Vow, we're executing enemies who are full of poison dots, which comes in handy for quick clearing those Infernal Hordes, Hell Tides, and the monsters in the escalating Nightmare Dungeons. On here, you're generally going to want the GA on max life as well as damage over time, and that is the most important thing. And then for our legendary rune, we're just running Sir and Ohm, which basically will give us 100% uptime on the Barbarian Warcry for an extra 15% damage multiplier. For our amulet, we are running the Dominion Chain of the Rabid Bear. On here, we're running the Rabid Bear because it's a big flat damage multiplier for all of our poison damage, and it also passively applies rabies every few seconds. On here, we want the willpower, and ideally we would want Toxic Claw and max life. So aim for that Toxic Claw, because the changes to Toxic Claw really give you a lot more power now than it did before. And then for your tempering, Grizzly Rage duration and Grizzly Rage cooldown both work here. Alternatively, for the Grizzly Rage duration, you could roll poison damage here if you prefer. And for the seasonal gem here, we're running the one that gives us a 6% primary core stat and a 6% max life increase, and being unhindered, allowing us to move freely through enemies. For our first ring, we're using the Ring of the Starless Sky. Ideally, we'd like to get a GA on Lucky Hit. or our core skill, just to give our dot that we get from our shred a bit more damage. And with this gem, we're running the gem that gives our catalytic skill a dot itself. So it deals 33% of its weapon damage as poison over 3 seconds. So this is a super strong, it's just another dot that we can add. And then lastly, for our last ring, we're running the virulent aspect, which basically reduces cooldown on rabies when it hits enemy monsters, which is tripled against elites, and anything affected by rabies, which will be everything, takes 50% increased damage. We want willpower, max life, and damage over time on this ring, taking Grizzly Rage duration and Grizzly Rage cooldown reduction for our tempering. And that will cover all of our equipment here. So as I discussed before, you definitely need the Andariel's Visage for this build to have it function the best, but you can make some changes with the chest piece. You can either run the Mad Wolf's Glee for the bonus skill points into shred and rabies. Alternatively, you can also run a chest piece that is just going to fit some of the defensive needs you need, whether that's life, resistances, or anything like that. For the Shattered Vow, you can switch this up into a two-hander weapon and put a damage multiplier aspect on it and add the tempering to increase the duration of rabies. Or you can use a one-hander and offhand, and in your offhand get the willpower and health and lucky hit chance. And for your main hand, you would then just use an axe with some good stats on there, again increasing the tempering with the duration for rabies increase to increase the damage of our rabies. And then for our ring, the Ringlet of Starless Skies, again another damage multiplier aspect we'd want to throw in here to just get that increased, and we can run the same stats as our other ring where we're running the willpower, max life, and damage over time with the Grizzly Rage duration and Grizzly Rage cooldown reduction. For our Heraldric Spellcraft, we'll be using the Disintegrate, for it is a damage over time, with the infusion of the Corrosive Vapor, which will make it a poison damage over time as well, and an additional poison damage over time. And for the Arcana, we're going to be using Pressurized Steam just for some CC, Potent Alloy to destroy barriers and some CC. And then lastly, we're using the Frigid Heart for some more CC. For the Spirit Boons, Deer Spirit, we're running Prickle Skin. Gives us a 5 damage. It gives us a 5% damage multiplier against enemies for 5 seconds after they've hit us. Alternatively, if you're finding you're a bit squishy, you can use Wariness for that 15% damage reduction against elites. Our primary Spirit Boon is Eagle, where we're taking the Iron Feathered for the 30% max life, and the Swooping Attacks for the attack speed to proc more of our poison damage. For the Wolf, we're taking Calamity. It extends the duration of Grizzly Rage by 35%. And for the Snake, we're taking Overload because enemies are going to be constantly hit by Shred, which, while in Grizzly Rage, is a poison attack, which will have a 35% chance to proc this Lightning Bolt. And the Lightning Bolt is also going to put a dot on them, which is going to scale that poison damage that we get from our gem that we have socketed in our other ring there, that says after you deal damage over time to an enemy, they take 0.33% multiplicative more damage over time forever from you, specifically from you. So just know it won't stack if you're in a party. For our skills, for our basic skills, we're just taking a Point and Claw, Point and Maul, so we can get the quick shift bonus from our ultimate passives, and Claw to just give us a spirit generator while we're in Grizzly Rage. In our core tree, we're taking Shred, maxing out our points here, and making sure to take the Raging Shred so we can get the additional poisoning damage multiplier as well as a damage over time effect. For the passive points, we do 1 point in Heart of the Wild and 3 in Wild Impulse just to increase the damage of that dot for our shred. For our defensive tree, we're doing 1 point in Blood Howl and taking the innate Blood Howl for the 25% damage multiplier while we're werewolf, which is all the time, most of the time. Then for the passives, we're taking Backlash, 3 points for a damage multiplier whenever we Blood Howl, and then Ancestral Fortitude and Vigilance for some defenses. In our companion tree, we are taking 5 points in Poison Creeper for another source of poison damage, putting our point into the Ferocious Poison Creeper to increase that poison duration. And we're also taking Feral Aptitude for our passive here for some flat damage multipliers. In our Wrath tree, we're putting 3 points in Charged Atmosphere. This gives us a Lightning Bolt proc for our Spirit Boon, which will give us another source of poison damage over time. 1 point in Electric Shock, just so we can make it to Bad Omen, so that way whenever an enemy is vulnerable, we have a lucky hit chance to 30% to summon a Lightning Bolt, which would also proc the poison damage over time from our Spirit Boon. We're putting maximum points in Rabies here, because we get a lot of our damage from Rabies. And we're taking Natural Rabies, so it spreads faster, but you could switch to Savage Rabies, so it deals the damage faster. It's really a matter of your preference here. You want 3 points in Toxic Claw, because this is going to increase our poison damage by 30% while we're in werewolf form. We're going to take Neurotoxin to make our poisoning damage slow enemies. And then we have 1 point in Envenom. It really doesn't matter because we're not focused on crit strike damage. In our ultimate tree, we're taking Grizzly Rage, since we're doing a werewolf Grizzly Rage build. We're taking 3 points in Heightened Sense and 3 points in Quick Shift, just to get these stacked up before we go into Grizzly Rage for some extra defenses and damage. And we're taking 3 points in Defensive Posture, because we'll be at max Fortify, giving us a little bit of damage reduction. And then for our key passive here, we're taking Bestial Rampage. This will give us another damage multiplier and some additional attack speed, so we can get those poison dots on faster. For our Paragon board, I'm going to give you a very high level. In the build guide down below, you can see a little more of the basics of what you're going to want to do, at least for the first couple hundred points. For your first tree here, you're going to want to use Fang and Claw. This is just going to give you some extra damage through the magic nodes, and then as well as give you increased damage to close enemies and increased damage while shape-shifted once you get to level 46. For the next board, we're using Heightened Malice, where we're going to get the damage against poisoned enemies and more damage against the more poisoned enemies close to us, with the Keeper Glyph in here, which is going to increase our non-physical damage against enemies, and further increase that with another multiplier once we get the glyph to level 46. And then for our next board here, we're using Ancestral Guidance for another damage multiplier after we spend our spirit, which we will be using all the time with Shred. Running the Glyph of Headhunters in here, just hitting the points we need to get those for the flat damage increase against elites, and then the basic flat damage increase against enemies. For our next board here, we're running the Lust for Carnage. We're not running the node here because we don't do crit strike damage, so it doesn't really matter. And the 2 spirit we don't really need on crits. Running the Glyph Tracker in here, and this gives us an additional duration on poison damage of 40%, as well as increasing damage by a flat amount. And then lastly, we're running the Inner Beast tree, and here we're using the Bane Glyph, which gives us a chance to deal double the damage over the damage over time duration, as well as increasing poison damage by a flat 8%. Like I said, you can check the build guide down below for a more in-depth look at this. And for your entertainment, here's a showcase of a Pit 75 run, and we'll catch you at the end of the run. And there you have it, folks. Our Grizzly Rage Poison Druid. We have a build guide in the description down below for you guys to follow. And if you enjoyed the build guide, leave a like. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see some more videos like this. And we also stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays with some bonus ones here and there when we can. So really appreciate you guys coming to watch the video. I hope you find great success with the build, and we'll catch you next time. Until next time, my friends.